Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. A dramatic U.S. raid in Venezuela that started the year has deepened fears global rules are breaking down. One major consequence is the accelerating shift away from U.S.-led security and trade institutions as countries are pursuing their own arrangements. We're already seeing this with traditional U.S. allies like Canada and the U.K. striking deals with China. For Türkiye, 2026 will be about navigating a world with fewer certainties, where it'll seek to balance its interests in the old system as a new world order emerges. Safiye Amri explains.
The rules-based international order is under its greatest strain since World War II. From the war on Gaza to the U.S.'s unprecedented capture of Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, questions are mounting about whether global institutions still serve their initial purpose of preventing chaos and enforcing accountability. For countries positioned between rival blocs, that question is no longer theoretical. And for Türkiye, geographically and politically situated between East and West, it has become a defining challenge. Throughout 2025, the warning signs were unmistakable. Global military spending surged to historic levels, rising 9.4% worldwide, with Europe leading the increase. This acceleration reflects a world steadily moving away from diplomacy and toward deterrence. The war in Ukraine, now entering its fourth year, has fundamentally reshaped security dynamics in the Black Sea and Eastern Europe. At the same time, conflicts in Gaza, Syria, and the wider region are no longer unfolding in isolation. They are overlapping and reinforcing one another. Modern warfare has also changed the equation. Low-cost, high-volume military capabilities, particularly drones and unmanned systems, are now central to conflict. They have lowered the threshold for sustained warfare, making escalation easier, faster, and harder to contain. Beyond the battlefield, competition has intensified among the world's major powers. Rivalry among the United States, China, and Russia is blurring the line between civilian and military power, and now spans technology, critical supply chains, cyber capabilities, and information warfare. Global leadership has grown more transactional. Washington has increasingly relied on tariffs, sanctions, and economic pressure to manage disputes and secure strategic interests. This fragmented environment has weakened global institutions and opened the way for new regional blocs and leadership. As a NATO member, Türkiye remains embedded within the alliance, playing a stabilizing role across key regions while also steadily expanding its domestic defense industry. Ankara''s relations with Washington are anchored in pragmatic coordination and high adaptability. With the European Union, cooperation has increasingly centered on security and defense, even as political integration remains stalled. As 2026 unfolds, the world remains in flux. New battlefronts have emerged and existing conflicts remain unresolved. But Ankara hopes the pushback against chaos will hopefully gain momentum. Safiye Amri, Straight Talk.
For more, joining me now from Ankara is Murat Yeşiltaş. He's the Foreign Policy Director at SETA. Murat, thanks for joining me. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, obviously a lot going around in Turkey's geography. But I want to talk about this report that you co-authored looking at Turkey's foreign policy and security. And I don't want the regular talk where we discuss issues. I want to dive deeper, the concepts, the parameters, 5 key parameters actually, which are in the report. So I want to begin by talking about great power competition, how it's impacting the region, and how Turkey is reading this when it's formulating its policy.
Thank you, Yusuf, and thank you for invitation. It's great honor to be with you again. Security Radar, which is published by SETA, this is the 8th edition of the Security Radar. It is the most comprehensive content that we are trying to cover from the experts of SETA. So, of course, as you mentioned, the great power competition is one of the important parameters of international politics. It is the manifestations of the transformation of international system, but I think it will shape the nature of international system. It seems that the competition basically is formalized within the context of U.S.-China competition, but I think it is a really critical competition beyond the two superpower competition. So when we look at this geopolitical competition, there are different dynamics. But number one dynamics is about the economic competition, of course, which has been, important, especially for the Trump administration. So this gonna be the one of the most important dynamics of the international politics in the upcoming years. Of course, Turkey is a unique country in terms of its geopolitical positions. There are different conflicts around Turkey. Ukraine is not only the conflict that directly shaped Turkey's strategic landscape. There are also other potential dynamics. As you know, since the fall of Assad regime, Turkey has been trying to stabilize Syria by working closely with the new Damascus government and other international actors. But now we are talking about the potential United States military strikes against Iran or Israeli potential strikes against Iran. So it is, I think, one of the important region in terms of the great power competition. But the most important thing for Turkey that is Turkey is trying to adapt itself to the great power competition in different layers.
There's been a lot written about Turkey's balancing act between Russia and the United States. But over the past year, especially since the return of U.S. President Donald Trump, Erdogan, his very close personal relationship with Trump, and the many files that Trump has opened or has been very active on, Ukraine, Gaza, Syria, having a lot of room for alignment with the Turkish president's policies. Is that balance now a little more shifting to Turkey's default setting of being closer to the United States in this great power competition?
It is normal to, expect that the Turkey and United States relation is reconsidered by both capitals in Washington and Ankara here. There are different perspectives, of course, but I see that there is an increasing convergences between two countries. Number one, the leadership level diplomacy is really important. Trump likes President Erdogan, and President Erdogan has a lot of, issues that can easily talk with Trump himself personally. So this leadership, I think, level of diplomacy practices is really shaping the nature of Turkish-American relations. Another one I think is really important, that there is also a strategic convergences between two countries in terms of the relocation and repositioning of Turkey within the context of wider geopolitical competition. After the Ukraine war, for example, Turkish geopolitical position and diplomatic maneuver capacity have been transforming, and United States, I think, is really supporting Turkey's capitalizing role in its geopolitical position. Now we are basically talking about the emergence of European security and defense architecture, in which Turkey is going to play a huge role. This is a really valuable asset for United States. While there are many problems for many NATO countries within the European security and defense architecture, Turkey's NATO role and Turkey's capacity, not only as a military power within the framework of NATO, but also its diplomatic capacity in solving the problem from Ukraine to Syria, from Syria to Sudan. This is a really important for United States in terms of underlying the importance of Turkey as a new geopolitical actor. So therefore, I think I see a growing convergences between United States and Turkey. Middle East, I think, is a textbook example that we can talk about more, how Turkey and United States have been really working closely in terms of stabilizing the political transitionary period in Syria.
Before I move on, just one quick question. I mean, the Turkish position on Syria hasn't changed. What drove the U.S. to align more with Turkey on Syria? Is it just a change in leadership where Trump had a different view on Syria, or are there more dynamics that push the United States closer to Turkey's position on Syria?
I think one of the important drivers behind the change of the United States posture in Syria is not about the leadership change. Of course, Trump has been playing a vital role in terms of integrating Syria into the international system, in terms of lifting the sanction against Syria. Trump is really important in this manner. And Trump, I think, himself is a strategic tool in this context. But beyond all these leadership driver factors, some of the structural factors that would be impossible to sustain for the United States in the context of Syria. Number one, Syria is a new state now. Shara government is trying to reestablish the entire state. And this is the moment that the international system, I think, is supporting the unified Syria. The territorially integrated Syria. United States now is seeing that non-state armed actors cannot play a role in the Middle East. It has started actually with the October the 7th. Now United States is more investing its Middle Eastern strategy on states, not the non-state armed actors. Number two is about the sociological conditions and other structural conditions on the ground. I personally have been, arguing that this is not a sustainable policy for many reasons, because YPG doesn't have a legitimacy in the Arab, region, Raqqa, Deir ez-Zor, and geopolitically, it's not a sustainable policy for the United States, because Syria doesn't want to see YPG, which has an autonomous region. Turkey doesn't want to support the idea of separation in Syria, and other regional government, maybe except Israel, don't want to see the Syria, which is territorially divided into different cartographic region, let's say cartographic region. So this is the reason. Now United States has a reasonable position, and United States supports the integration of the other local actors into the state, and this states will be the example for the stability in the Middle East region.
Now, another key parameter that the SETA report focuses on is escalation, or the fear of escalation, and how it could shape global or regional policies, developments, events. Can you expand on that?
I mean, one of the important questions that many experts now are asking: what type of international system that we are living under, or what type of international system that we are going towards? Is it a peacetime or is it a wartime? I think it's really difficult to separate peacetime from wartime or wartime from peacetime. We are living in between. It is not a perfect peacetime for many countries, but it is not a perfect, sort of definition to define the current system with reference to the wartime. So when we look at the in-betweenness in terms of the transitionary period, I see escalation dynamics are really important for this transitionary period. But there are two, I think, important instruments or the perceptions towards the escalation dynamics in international politics. Number one is about the escalations in different parts of the regions. So therefore, there is a sort of horizontal escalation. There are many different war dynamics in the Middle East, but there are war dynamics in the European security landscape, or there are escalation dynamics in Latin America. There are escalation dynamics, potential military conflicts in the Southeast Asia and other parts of the world. This is a really interesting things to observe in terms of the impact of the horizontal escalation. But at the same time, there is an also vertical escalation moment. When we look at the 12th day war between Iran and Israel, when we take into consideration a very brief war between Afghanistan and Pakistan and India, there are a lot of examples that you can take into consideration. This is really shaping the international system and the behavior of states and the motivation of states. But at the same time, we have also other dynamics. which is directly related to psychological fear about escalation. Now we are expecting, as a expert here in Turkey or other places, a potential escalation between United States and Iran and Israel. This is a real escalation fear because it will shape the region. It has a spillover potential for Turkey and other
This is
countries,
something.
especially the
This is
Gulf
something that seems
countries.
very concerning for Turkish foreign policy. The Iranian foreign minister is in town right now, meeting with his Turkish counterpart, Hakan Fidan. There's been talk of Turkey strengthening its border. At the same time, Hakan Fidan and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan calling for restraint from the United States. Erdogan saying, let me set up a video conference between the heads of state of the U.S. and Iran. So it looks like Turkey is trying to do a lot to avoid any type of escalation on its borders. How else is this shaping the calculations inside of Ankara, a potential U.S. strike or Israeli strike against Iran?
I think it's a really important difference for Turkey and Turkish foreign policy. Turkey in the international system and in its region makes difference or has the ability to make difference for many conflicts in our region. So concerning Iran, yes, I mean it will be a nightmare for the region if United States conduct a sort of different type of military strike without calculating the end game. What is the end game? What is the strategic calculation for the United States at the end of this military strike or for Israel? Okay, so this is really creating an uncertainty for the region. It also creates a strategic uncertainty for Turkey because Turkey has been suffering a lot from different type of conflict in our region. So therefore, Turkey is a really exceptional case in terms of proposing an idea of a table, diplomatic table. But on the other side, Turkey has sort of limitations because United States has different calculation, Iran has different calculation now after the 12th day wars. Iran is really weakening, is weakening, and Iran doesn't have leverage. So, but at the same time, imposing at least 3 or 4 conditions to Iran and wait to accept from the Iranian side is not a rational and an optimistic expectation, as Foreign Minister Fidan has rightly mentioned about this. But what Turkey is proposing is a step-by-step solution. First, you can go to the file of the nuclear program of Iran, and Iran can give some compromise to the United States and the international community. If we can solve this problem, which of course Iran has to solve this problem, but Iran takes, it takes time. Iran needs time. And second, we can move on to the second file to talk about how we're gonna, cut the ballistic missile capacity of Iran. Of course, it will not be a condition to surrender Iran in terms of, thinking Iran as a state. Then we can move on to the proxy file. So, but this is how Turkey is acting now. But the real capacity of Turkey is an honest broker. Mm-hmm. Turkey is not directly supporting what Iran is doing in internal, developments in terms of the, demonstrations of the Iranian people. Or Turkey is not directly supporting the idea of direct military strike to the any target here in Iran. So that, but if you create a diplomatic table to find a common solution, then that's going to be okay for the region to bring stability to the region. This is how Turkey, I think, or Ankara is thinking now.
I want to move on to the next parameter that you highlighted, the deepening of the global governance crisis. Now, what do you exactly mean by this? Are you focusing on the United Nations as a global governance body, or are you more concentrated on the fragmentation or the deterioration of the rules-based order since World War II?
Both of them, I think, because there is a huge legitimacy crisis in international governance or the global governance. We have been observing since the end of the Cold War. Now we are expecting a revision in the international governance structure. But of course, from the perspective of 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, it is, it is really difficult to solve from their perspective. But we need an urgency, sort of formula to fix the problem of United Nations. United Nations, I think, is the main problem in terms of undermining the legitimacy of the international order, which has been constructed and reconstructed since the end of the Second Cold War. But at the end of the day, United Nations, I think, are shaped by the countries. So therefore, the countries first of all have to think about how we're gonna fix the problem of United Nations. But beyond this, the legitimacy crisis is not the only problem of the international governance structure. There is an also problem of representation. There is a lack of representation in the international global governance system, because the United States or other countries, five permanent members now can decide whatever they want. But it's not logical to expect from their perspective a solution to any particular cases. We have been witnessing a genocide in Gaza, which has been committed by Israel. So why United Nations could not find a solution to the Gaza genocide? Not only because of the United Nations, but because of the the United States or other countries which have a seat in the Security Council. So therefore, we need a sort of a new model in the representations of other actors in the United Nations. So what we have been observing, that the norm-based, rule-based international order are now losing its meaning. This is a huge strategic challenge, but at the same time, other countries like China, Russia, or the countries which are trying to be part of BRICS and other international organizations are trying to produce their own norm perspective. At the end of the day, we have only one framework, the competition and or the conflict amongst the norms. But we need only universal norms that can be applicable for every nations, every countries. So this is a really important and strategically critical moment that we are now experiencing. We have to fix this problem immediately.
This is definitely challenging, but at the same time, it looks like Turkey has been able to carve out a diplomatic facilitator niche for itself. I want to move on with the final two parameters because I am running out of time. You talk about the acceleration of the arms race, and you also talk about technological competition, obviously two very important things for Turkey, with a robust domestic defense industry and also many new sectors like AI rolling in that Turkey is embracing as well. How are these very important to Turkish foreign and security policies?
It is really important for Turkish foreign policies. Number one is about the arm race in the international system. It's not a new phenomenon, by the way, but after the war in Ukraine, we have been observing the sort of new security and defense architecture attempt by the European countries, and they now are designing a new program like SAFE or ReArm program. It will change the entire security and military balance landscape across the Europe. But there are also other regions in which many countries are investing their own military power. At the end of the day, we will face a lot of challenges, especially in terms of facing a real security dilemma, right? Between different states, between Turkey and Greece, maybe between Turkey and Israel and other Gulf countries, or in the Southeast Asia. There are countries which have been heavily investing their own military power. They really want to improve and recalibrate their military power. Turkey is not an exception, but Turkey has a strategic advantages in terms of calibrating its own military power. What type of military power do we need? This is an exactly important question for Turkish foreign policy. It is directly related to the technological capacity. So this is the reason why we are insisting on technological competition. Some of the scholars define this moment as technopolar moment in which different countries are competing against each other. But technological capacity is really important.
At a time where Turkey is becoming part of almost every global conversation, a very invaluable report by SETA and co-authored by yourself. Murat Yeşiltaş, thank you for joining me. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find more exclusive content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.